Talk to us about the conversations about El Salvadorians who live in El Salvador around Bitcoin. What have those conversations been like? I know there have been some instances where there have been protests against this, whether that was purely out of not understanding the technology or whether that was out of something else completely. Would love your general thoughts on that.
Well, like anywhere else, the conversation runs the full spectrum. So you have people that are just finding out about it, people who have been into it, and people who are zealots. And all across the board, everyone we've met in the government is a Bitcoin maximalist, understands the technology profoundly, talks about the technology brilliantly, and they're very excited about it. The people on the street, you know, again, you find those who are definitely into it. They talk about it. Then you have the curious. But the fact is that the population had 70% unbanked before Bitcoin, and now I think that's completely reversed. It's 70% is now banked thanks to Bitcoin. There are more Bitcoin wallets and users in El Salvador than there were users of the banking system in total combined with all banks in El Salvador. So there's been a complete flip in less than 6 months, and that's a remarkable transformation in less than 6 months. So within that group, you have people that they got their airdrop of Bitcoin and they're still checking it out, they're still looking at it, they're still finding out about it. I know that with groups like Swan Bitcoin, they are on the ground with education. So education is always appreciated. Bitcoin Magazine is always interested in doing education. And we're also interested in promoting education. There's the Hope House here in El Zonte, which is Bitcoin Beach, and they're constantly doing education and meetups. We've got Paxville in San Salvador. They just opened up a Bitcoin house. They're doing round-the-clock educational seminars. They're booked for weeks on end. People want to get there and get educated about it. So as you know, it's a virtuous cycle. Once you start thinking about Bitcoin, it changes the way you think about lots of stuff, and you want more and more and more, and then the community gets stronger and stronger, and so it's a virtuous cycle, and you see that playing out right here in a country that's made Bitcoin legal tender. So it's like a Bitcoin meetup times 1,000, powered by volcanoes, where you can go surfing.
And I would add as well that, yes, I think there were some protests in San Salvador, but again, like, you know, that I think from my observation, it appears to just be politics. You know, of course you don't want your opponent to succeed, right? In like transforming the economy and turning it into the new Singapore, where you have presided over a dilapidated state where people flee for the past 30, 40 years. Like, why would you want to be exposed as like a bad leader and a fraud that your parties were for decades, right? So that's just natural. On top of that, like here in El Zonte, the fact that the banking system, as Max mentioned, 70% of the population here was unbanked. And that ironically kind of drove in Bitcoin Beach area, which is very famous for surfing. So you had a lot of tourists coming here solely for surfing over the past decades. And we spoke to a shop owner who she was telling us that, you know, she ended up getting Bitcoin in her shop because she had so many Europeans here. And the Europeans would come and they had euros. There's no ATM because the banking system doesn't have ATMs provided for these sort of poorer communities outside of the cities here. So there was no cash, and people would come in and want to pay for their food or coffee and from Europe, and all they would have is euros, and they didn't have any dollars. So she would have to say, well, you'd have to go to El Tunco, which is like 20 minutes away, and there's an ATM there. So she started to get asked, do you accept Bitcoin? How about Bitcoin? So that was like the fact that the banking system here was so crap is part of the reason why Bitcoin adoption was driven. And you know, in terms of how the perception here, of course, this is Bitcoin Beach. Mike Peterson and Chimbetta, you know, Roman Martinez and Jorge Valenzuela have done an amazing job, extreme education on the ground, helping people out here. So it's hyper Bitcoinized here. Like as a Bitcoiner for a long time, this is like a fantasy world here. You almost can't believe this is true, that you're not hallucinating, that it's just hyper Bitcoinized. There's no question, there's no explanation. You don't need to explain it, they just get it.
So what are some of the, what does that look like to someone who hasn't been to El Salvador yet? Are you seeing regular citizens continue to use Chivo? I haven't heard much from Chivo in a long time, so I'm wondering what are they using to facilitate Bitcoin in shops in and around El Salvador these days?
I'm using the Moon Wallet, M-U-U-N, the Moon Wallet, because it's just easy. The Chivo wallet is for citizens, so they're using that. I haven't used it. I'm not a citizen at this moment, not quite yet. There's a plethora of different wallets being used, and people are very quick to use Bitcoin for payments because it's just really handy. People, tend to carry their phones around. They don't necessarily want to carry cash around. That's one thing. I mean, you're on the beach and you go in the water, your clothes are on the beach or what have you, and you want to leave a bunch of cash right there? No, it's perfect. You just have it locked up on your phone and you can use it. So it's just very natural. At some point, what's going to happen in the world, it happened when we saw the internet. The internet went from, in 1996, when I started my .com company in Los Angeles, the Hollywood Stock Exchange, the internet was still a novelty. Paul Krugman was writing about it, that it wouldn't have any impact greater than the fax machine. And people were doubtful that the internet was actually going to succeed. And people were trying to grapple with, well, how does it work? What's a packet? This is too complicated. And then it hits that inflection point, it becomes ubiquitous, and now we're in an internet world. So Bitcoin, similarly, what we're seeing here is what we're going to see in the rest of the world in a few years. That is, it's just accepted. People are not bogged down with trying to even know how it works or why it works. They just use it because it's part of the environment. It's part of the ecosystem. It becomes ubiquitous. It's as natural as using any other technology that becomes ingrained and inculcated in your day-to-day life. So that's what we're seeing right here. Bitcoin, hyper-Bitcoinization lives here.
I also want to add about Chivo. Have friends. I've actually made payments to friend on Chivo, both on-chain and Lightning. So it worked instantly. They have hired a new Alpha Point, to come in and revamp everything. And one thing I've heard from people who use it is the remarkable thing is that there's zero commission. Basically you're getting the spot price for Bitcoin. So, when we get our citizenship and I could start to use it, I would consider that for the basically free trading. So it is, people have pointed out, Bitcoiners who I know have pointed out how remarkable that you can get this without zero commission, no spread, no nothing.
Yeah, and you're definitely starting to see now an impact on the remittance market. So $400 million a year in remittances, 10%, up to 10% of that or so would go to Western Union and other intermediaries. So that's $40 or $50 million now that's just going to go right into people's pockets. It's not going to go into the intermediaries. That's a big chunk of change. And so the whole dynamics and economics shift because Bitcoin is perfect money.
And one more thing is, I was actually part of that Lightning torch. So when back in the reckless days of Lightning, and everybody talks about Lightning, is debated all the time, and theoretical debates about whether or not it's work, is it possible, is this a joke, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's used everywhere here in El Zonte. It's ubiquitous. So it's it's not theoretical here. It just is. And so it's amazing to walk into a world off of Bitcoin Twitter and step into the future that many say can't exist, but it's actually happening right here.